My name is Tessa Holloway, and my mother's funeral was 2 days ago. 2 days. I was still wearing black, still waking up with my chest tight, still finding her coffee mug in the sink and forgetting, just for a second, that she was gone. The house smelled like flowers from church, and unopened casseroles lined the counter. Grief was everywhere, loud and quiet at the same time. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing when my husband, Grant, walked in and sat across from me. Not beside me, across from me. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't ask if I'd slept. He cleared his throat the way people do before a work presentation. "Tessa, we need to talk," he said. I looked up at him, my eyes swollen and burning. "Can it wait?" I asked. "I don't think I can handle much right now." He nodded once, calm, almost polite. "I've already waited long enough," he said. "I think we should separate." The word didn't land at first. Separate. It floated between us like it didn't belong there. Like it had been spoken in the wrong house on the wrong day. "My mom was buried 2 days ago," I said slowly. 2 days. "I know the timing isn't ideal," Grant replied, "but we've been drifting for years. This is just being honest." Honest. As he spoke, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't sad. He was prepared, his voice steady, his posture relaxed, like this conversation had been rehearsed long before my mother took her last breath. And in that moment, sitting in my grief with a man who looked relieved, I realized something terrifying. He hadn't chosen this moment by accident. My mother's name was Lois Holloway, and she was the kind of woman people trusted without asking why. She was a retired union nurse, the kind who packed her own lunch every day and still clipped coupons, even when she did not have to. She raised me with quiet discipline and steady love. No speeches, no dramatics, just consistency. Bills paid on time, doors locked at night, papers filed neatly in labeled folders. Growing up, I watched her read everything before she signed it. She taught me early that love and responsibility were not the same thing. That being kind did not mean being careless, that you could have a soft heart and still protect yourself. After my father died, it was just the two of us. She worked long shifts, came home tired, and still found the energy to ask me about my day. Not in a rushed way. In a way that said she was really listening. When I married Grant, my mother welcomed him politely. She never criticized him. Never warned me outright, but she watched, and every now and then she would pull me aside and ask a question that felt simple on the surface. "Are you happy, Tessa?" Not excited, not comfortable, happy. I always said yes, and she always nodded, like she was filing the answer away for later. In her last year, she became more direct, not harsh, just clearer. "Some people change when they start counting what is not theirs," she told me once while folding laundry. "Pay attention to how people talk about money. It tells you more than how they talk about love." She also made me promise something. "Whatever happens," she said, squeezing my hand, "you trust Harold Mendez. He has looked out for this family longer than anyone." At the time, I thought she was just being cautious. I did not realize she was building armor around me. When Grant and I first got married, our life was simple and steady. We rented a small place near downtown Charleston. We cooked at home, watched movies on the couch, and talked about the future in a way that felt hopeful, not rushed. Grant worked in insurance sales. I was a school counselor. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. At least I thought we were. About 5 years in, something shifted. It did not happen all at once. There was no single argument, no dramatic moment. It was a collection of comments, small ones, easy to dismiss if you were not looking closely. Grant started pointing out nicer neighborhoods when we drove through town. He compared our car to other people's cars. He talked about vacations we should be taking and houses we deserved. He also started talking about my job differently. "You're too smart to be making that kind of money," he'd say. "You're settling." At first I took it as concern. Then it became frustration. Then it became quiet resentment. Money turned into a scoreboard. Who was contributing more? Who was holding us back? Who was slowing the climb? My mother noticed. She never confronted him. She never repeated his words to me. But she watched how he spoke. How his eyes lingered when money came up. How his tone changed when success belonged to someone else. I ignored it. I believed marriage meant patience. That commitment meant staying, even when things felt uncomfortable. I told myself every relationship had phases. I did not understand yet that love does not keep score. Greed does. The diagnosis came fast and without mercy. Late-stage cancer. No gentle build-up. No long timeline to prepare. One appointment turned into many, and suddenly my mother's world shrank to hospital rooms, medication schedules, and quiet conversations whispered at night. I took a leave from work without hesitation. I packed a bag and split my time between our house and hers. Some nights I slept on her couch. Other nights I stayed up listening to her breathe, afraid of the silence. Grant did not handle it well. At first, he said the right things. Let me know if you need anything. Tell your mom I'm praying for her. But soon the complaints started. You're never home anymore. We barely talk. I feel like I don't matter. One night, after a long day at the hospital, he said something that stopped me cold. I get that she's sick, but what about us? I looked at him and realized this was a test, not of love, of priority. For the first time in my life, I did not soften my answer. My mother needs me, I said, and I'm not apologizing for that. He went quiet, not angry, withdrawn, like someone taking notes. During those months, my mother and I talked about everything. Childhood memories, old mistakes, things we never had time to say before. One night, when her voice was weak and the room was dark, she held my hand and repeated something she had already told me before. Some people stay kind only as long as nothing is at stake, she said. Watch what happens when they think there's something to gain. She made me promise again to trust Harold Mendez. 2 weeks later, she was gone. 2 days after we buried her, Grant sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked for a separation. That was the moment I knew my mother had been right. The morning after Grant asked for a separation, he came back with a folder in his hand. I was still in my pajamas, still moving like my body belonged to someone else. He sat down at the table again, the same seat, the same calm expression. I already spoke to a lawyer, he said. I filed. These are the papers. I stared at the folder. Divorce papers, prepared, organized, timed. My mom just died, I said quietly. We buried her yesterday. I know, he replied, but dragging this out will only make things harder. We should keep it clean. Fair. Fair. He started talking about selling the house, about splitting assets evenly, about how uncomplicated things could be if we stayed reasonable. Then he said it. Anything your mother left you would be part of the marriage. That's how it works. I looked up at him. Is this about her estate? He sighed like I was being dramatic. Why would you think that? I'm just being practical. Practical. He explained community property laws like he'd memorized them. He warned me about delays, about complications, about what happens when emotions get in the way of logic. Before he left, he turned back and added, almost casually, you should probably talk to a lawyer too. That was not advice. It was pressure. And for the first time since my mother passed, I remembered exactly what she told me to do when people started counting what was not theirs. Harold Mendez's office was quiet in a way that made my shoulders drop the moment I walked in. He stood up when he saw me, his face softening. I'm so sorry about your mother, Tessa, he said. Lois was a remarkable woman. He did not rush me. He let me sit, let me breathe. Then he asked one question. Has Grant mentioned your inheritance yet? My stomach tightened. Yes, I said. He says it's marital property. Harold nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. Your mother thought he might, he said. That's why she came to see me 6 months ago. 6 months ago, before the diagnosis, before any talk of divorce. He opened a folder and slid it toward me. Your mother created an inheritance protection trust, he explained. Everything she left you is placed there. The house, the savings, the insurance, all of it. I stared at the numbers, struggling to process them. This trust was designed to make sure no spouse could ever claim those assets, Harold continued. It was completed long before Grant filed for divorce. It is separate property, fully protected. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. She knew, I whispered. She suspected, he corrected gently, and she planned. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. She asked me to give you this after I explained the trust. Inside was my mother's handwriting. Familiar, steady. My girl, she wrote. This money is not control, it is freedom. Freedom to leave if you need to. Freedom to stand without fear. Tears blurred the page. Harold leaned back. "We're not going to confront him yet," he said. "We're going to let him show us exactly who he is." For the first time since my mother died, I did not feel powerless. I felt prepared. When I got home that evening, Grant was already there. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened, like he hadn't asked for a divorce while I was still planning my mother's memorial flowers. "Did you talk to a lawyer?" he asked, not looking up. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. That got his attention. He looked up immediately. "And?" "They said fighting this would only make things more expensive," I replied. "We should probably move forward." I watched his shoulders relax, just slightly, like someone who thought they were back in control. "That's mature," he said. "I knew you'd see reason." I nodded. "There's more to my mom's estate than I realized." His eyes changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "How much more?" he asked. "Enough that it complicates things," I said carefully. He leaned closer. "Well, we can work through that together. We're still married. No reason to make this harder than it needs to be." That night, he suggested moving back in fully, said it would save money, said adults could handle things calmly. Every part of me wanted to say no. Instead, I agreed he could stay in the guest room. I smiled when I said it. I kept my tone soft, cooperative. Because sometimes the safest move is to let someone believe they're winning. And Grant believed it completely. 3 days later, Grant caught me in the kitchen as I was pouring coffee. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, suddenly upbeat. I stayed where I was. "About the divorce?" "About an opportunity," he replied. "For us." That word again. Us. He pulled out his phone and started talking fast. A friend from college, a new business, early access, limited spots, the kind of story that sounded impressive if you did not slow it down. "He's asking for investors," Grant said. "Serious ones. And I thought, with your mom's money coming in, this could be perfect timing." My grip tightened on the mug. "How much?" I asked. 100,000, he said quickly, just as an advance. "On my share." My share. He explained it like it was logical, that since we were still married it made sense, that the money would be split anyway, that this would actually benefit me in the long run. "It's temporary," he added. "We'll adjust the numbers once everything is finalized." I looked at him and realized something had changed. He was not asking. He was assuming. "I need time to think," I said. His smile tightened. "Of course, but not too long. He needs an answer by Friday." That afternoon, I drove straight to Harold Mendes' office. He listened without interrupting, then he nodded once. "That's it," he said. "That's the moment your mother predicted." I felt my chest tighten. "So what now?" Harold closed the folder in front of him. "Now we stop letting him imagine," he said. "Now we show him exactly what your mother put in place." I drove home knowing something important had shifted. Grant was done pretending. And so was I. The meeting was set for Monday morning at Harold Mendes' office. Grant arrived early, dressed sharper than usual, with his lawyer beside him. Scott Fletcher looked exactly like I expected. Expensive suit, confident smile, the kind of man who spoke like outcomes were already decided. They sat across from us at the long conference table. Grant would not look at me. He did not need to. He thought he knew how this would end. Scott spoke first. "My client believes this can be resolved quickly," he said. "Mrs. Holloway recently received an inheritance during the marriage. Under community property principles, those assets should be divided equally." Harold nodded calmly. He did not rush. He opened a folder and slid it forward. "Your client is mistaken," he said. "Miss Holloway's inheritance is not marital property." Grant leaned forward. "That's not possible," he said. "We're married." Harold's voice stayed steady. 6 months before her passing, Lois Holloway established an inheritance protection trust. Every asset was placed there before any divorce filing. Ms. Holloway is the sole beneficiary. The trust explicitly excludes spousal claims. Scott picked up the document and began reading fast. Too fast, his confidence faded line by line. "This trust is irrevocable," Harold continued. "It is legally sound. It cannot be challenged successfully." Grant's face changed. She had no right to do this, he snapped. That woman knew what she was doing. I spoke for the first time. Do not talk about my mother, I said quietly. Not like that. The room went still. Scott cleared his throat. Challenging this will be costly, Harold added, and you will lose. Grant finally understood. He was not losing money. He was losing control. Grant did not call me after the meeting. Instead, he went online. That evening, my phone started buzzing with messages from people I barely spoke to anymore. Former coworkers, distant relatives, someone from church asking if I was okay. I opened my laptop and saw it. A long post on Grant's social media page, calm, polished, written to sound reasonable. He said he had asked for a divorce because I was controlling, that I isolated him, that I cared more about money than marriage. He claimed I was trying to keep what should be shared. Reading it felt like being erased and rewritten at the same time. For a moment I wanted to respond, to explain, to defend myself line by line. I called Harold instead. Do nothing, he said without hesitation. Do not reply, do not correct him, save everything. But people believe him, I said. They are commenting, sharing it. I know, Harold replied, and that is exactly why you stay quiet. Courts do not care about posts. They care about patterns, evidence, behavior. So I took screenshots, I saved dates, I wrote down every message and every call. Nia came over that night and sat with me on the couch. He is trying to control the story because he lost control of the money, she said. Let him talk. She was right. The people who really knew me did not ask questions. They checked on me. And the ones who believed him without asking were quietly revealing themselves too. I went to bed that night shaken but clear. If Grant needed noise to feel powerful, I would use silence. Because silence, when backed by truth, is not weakness. It is strategy. 3 days after Grant's post went viral, I came home to a quiet that felt wrong. The front door was open. I stood frozen on the porch, keys still in my hand, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I did not go inside. I stepped back, got in my car, locked the doors, and called the police. They arrived quickly. When the officers walked back out, one of them looked at me gently. You're going to want to see this, he said. My house looked like it had been turned inside out. Drawers dumped. Frames shattered. Cabinets open. Someone had spray painted a word across my kitchen wall. Greedy. In my bedroom, my jewelry was scattered across the floor. Not stolen. Destroyed. My mother's necklace lay in pieces. On the mirror, written in the same paint, were the words, "You will regret this." I did not scream. I could not. I just stood there shaking while the officers took photos and asked questions. That night, I stayed with Nia. The next morning, I returned to the house with police and found something I did not expect. People. Neighbors. Church members. Women who had known my mother for years. Men who remembered her helping them when no one else did. They brought gloves, cleaning supplies, food. We heard, one of them said, "You're not doing this alone." For hours they helped me clean, repaint, and put things back together. They told stories about my mother, about her kindness, about her strength. Grief had stripped me down. But in that wreckage I saw clearly. Grant had tried to isolate me. Instead, he reminded me exactly who my real family was. The bond hearing was held 2 days later. Grant stood in front of the judge looking smaller than I remembered, tired, unshaven. The anger that once fueled him had nowhere to go now. The prosecutor presented photos of my home, the vandalism, the threats, the timeline. Grant's lawyer tried to explain it away as stress, as heartbreak, as a man overwhelmed by loss. The judge did not agree. A temporary restraining order was granted. Grant was ordered to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. Criminal charges followed. The divorce moved forward quickly after that. There was no long fight anymore. Without access to my inheritance, Grant had no leverage left. The final settlement was simple. We divided only what we had built together. The rest remained untouched, exactly as my mother intended. When the judge signed the papers, I felt something lift from my chest. Freedom. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life quietly. I renovated my mother's house and kept it. I went back to school. I traveled for the first time without asking permission from anyone. I also created a small scholarship in my mother's name, something steady, something lasting. People ask me now if I regret my marriage. I don't. I regret ignoring the early warnings. I regret doubting the woman who loved me enough to plan for dangers I could not see yet. My mother did not leave me money. She left me protection. She left me choices. She left me the strength to walk away without fear. If this story stayed with you, take it as a reminder. Pay attention to how people act when something is at stake. Protect yourself without guilt. And if you believe stories like this matter, like the video, share it and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Your voice matters too.